SMU political science professor Matthew Wilson, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it as always. As you know, we've got the mayoral elections coming up May 6th, but early voting starts on Monday. And so let's talk about the mayoral races, because normally they attract a lot of attention. This year, we know that the mayors of our largest cities, Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington, Irving, all have either no opponent or very little opposition. What do you make of this?
Yeah, it certainly will depress interest and turnout, because usually the mayor's races for Dallas, Fort Worth, et cetera, are the signature events for these May municipal elections. And this cycle, there's simply no drama in any of those. The opposition is either non-existent or token. And so what that means is we're likely to see very low turnout. We're likely to see, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, we're likely to see very low turnout. We're likely to see less than 10% of eligible voters show up, because you've got a few municipal bond propositions, you've got a couple of council races here and there, but nothing that's really galvanizing people to get to the polls.
And so what do you make of that? I mean, does that mean, in a sense, that cities are working well and there's no groundswell of opposition to boot the incumbents out?
I do think that's part of it. We have not seen here in North Texas the kind of major urban discontent that we've seen in some major American cities over a huge surge of crime or homelessness or something like that. Not to say that Dallas and Fort Worth don't have problems, but there has not been this groundswell of anger and discontent with the existing government that we've seen some places. And so therefore, the voters are more or less apparently willing to just stay the course.
And in the case of Dallas, with Mayor Eric Johnson, you have a case where he got a lot of endorsements from a variety of elected officials, either from past Dallas mayors, state representatives, members of Congress. And then he raised a lot of money, over $1.3 million, even months ago. And so what do you think that says about that race?
Well, Mayor Johnson has a diverse, broad base of support. That is, he's relatively popular with the business community. He has support in minority communities in South Dallas. He has not been an ideological firebrand. He's been relatively centrist. It's not to say that everyone loves him, but certainly his support coalition is pretty broad, and no one thought that it would be worthwhile to try to mount a campaign to unseat him. And so his wide range of endorsements and his connections kind of across the social and ideological spectrum put him in a very strong position for re-election.
And, you know, one thing about the municipal elections here in Texas, for the most part, most cities and school boards as well, these are nonpartisan races, so there isn't that political dynamic driving it, right?
Right. In this day and age of polarization, a lot of Republicans end up at the polls because they don't like Democrats, and a lot of Democrats end up at the polls because they don't like Republicans. Well, in these municipal races, you don't have those party cues. You don't have the D versus R contests. And so the normal party apparatus of mobilization and those party cues that get people psychologically invested in the race aren't there. And so that tends to promote lower turnout as well.
And, you know, I guess it's different when the seats are open, because, you know, for the city of Dallas, for example, if well, Mayor Johnson's clearly on his way to being reelected, but that's it. I mean, it's 2 terms. And so I suspect when the seats are open, there's more energy, there's more candidates who want to go for it.
That's absolutely right. Usually, absent some sort of scandal or mismanagement or controversy, it's difficult to unseat an incumbent. And so a lot of people who might be thinking about a mayoral bid would rather just bide their time, wait for an open seat opportunity 4 years from now, rather than launching an uphill battle to try to unseat a relatively popular incumbent. So I think that does explain why we just don't see much action in that race.
And the fact that these municipal elections are on a Saturday in May, as opposed to being on what is normally election day in November. The cities could change that, but there doesn't seem to be much willingness to do so.
Yeah, there are pros and cons to doing it this way. On one hand, if you consolidated these municipal elections with other races in the fall, or certainly during a presidential year or a congressional year, you'd get higher voter turnout, no doubt about it. But a lot of those people voting wouldn't know anything about the races that they're voting on. That is, they'd be there to vote for the president or to vote for the Senate or governor or Congress with very little knowledge about who these municipal office seekers are. The argument for having them in May is that while voter turnout may be low, those people who show up will tend to at least have some level of information and interest in the race at hand. And so there's really a trade-off. Do you want to maximize turnout, or do you want to maximize the average information level of the people who are going to show up and vote? And thus far, North Texas has clearly opted for the latter.
And I wanted to ask you about school board, because we've seen schools as a whole have become quite the political issue.